Hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie and today I have a full body yoga stretch to share with you. I have been loving this class in my third trimester, but it is safe for all stages of pregnancy. You don't need any props to do today's class, but if you have some blocks, you might bring them to the front of your mat for later. When you're ready, grab your yoga mat and let's begin. We're going to begin today's class in child's pose. So bring your big toes together and your knees as wide as your yoga mat. On an inhale, you might drop the belly, open the chest, lift the gaze. And as you exhale, sink the hips back onto your heels and stretch your hands out in front of you. Bring your forehead down to the mat, or if you have those blocks, you can bring your forehead onto a block, creating more space for the front body and a little bit more space for baby. Wherever you are today, take a few moments to relax into the pose, breathing deeply in through the nose, with long exhales out through the nose. Again, inhaling through the nose, filling up the belly, filling up the back body, and exhaling through the nose. Take 3 more long inhales and exhales here at your own pace, doing your best to extend your exhale so that it's a bit longer than your inhale. On your next inhale, begin to slowly come out of child's pose, pushing up with your hands, bringing the knees back in line with your hips as we find our tabletop position. Take a moment to get settled here, making sure your wrists are under your shoulders, your knees are under your hips. Before we kick our left leg off the side of our mat, you want your left toes pointing in the same direction as the long edge of your mat, running parallel with that long edge of your mat. On an inhale, we'll drop our belly, open our chest, lift our gaze. As we exhale, tuck the pelvis around the spine, drop the gaze. We're going to take our cat-cow leg just like this. Inhaling, dropping the belly, lifting the gaze. Exhale, tuck the pelvis around the spine, drop the gaze. Good. Take a few more just like that, moving at your own pace. Noticing how this cat-cow feels different with your left leg off the mat. You might feel a gentle stretch through the inside of your left thigh. Let's take one more round of cat and cow here. Before finding our neutral tabletop position. On your inhale, swing the left toes out and around behind you so that they're off the right edge of your mat. You might stay here in your side body stretch, or you might walk your left fingertips over to the right side of your mat as well, finding a deeper side body stretch. We'll stay here for 3 breaths, breathing into that left side body. Again, inhaling through our nose, and exhaling through the nose. Long, slow exhales. Let's take one more, just like this. On your next inhale, bring your left hands back under your left shoulder and bring your left toes out behind you. We're going to turn our left toes so that they're parallel with the short edge of our mat, and we're going to rotate our right knee so that it's also parallel with the short edge of our mat. On an inhale, we'll bring our left hand up to the sky, finding a nice chest opener. Hold for 1 breath here. On your next inhale, use your left obliques to pull yourself up so that you're resting on your right knee. Inhale here. As you exhale, find your gate pose, dropping your left hand down to your left thigh or your left shin, and bringing your right hand overhead, bicep by the ear. Your gaze can be neutral out in front, or you might be looking up at the sky, enjoying a nice side body stretch through the right side body this time. Hold for one more breath. As you exhale, windmill the arms down, bringing the right palm back to the mat. This time bring the left arm overhead, left bicep by the ear, finding our side angle stretch. Again, make sure your chest is open, your gaze is neutral, out in front, or lifted towards the sky. We'll hold here for 2 more breaths. Enjoying a nice stretch through the side body. And on our next exhale, let's bring our left palm back to the earth, rotate our right knee, and bring our left knee back to meet the right, finding our tabletop. We're gonna take that same flow on the other side, finding our tabletop. We're gonna take that same flow on the other side, this time bringing our right leg out to the side, making sure our right toes are still pointing in the same direction as our mat. We'll take a few rounds of cat-cow here. Inhale, drop the belly, lift the gaze. We're gonna take that same flow on the other side. This time, kick your right leg off the mat, making sure your right toes are still pointing in the same direction as your mat and parallel with that long edge. We'll take a few rounds of cat and cow. Inhale, drop the belly, lift the gaze. Exhale, tuck the pelvis around the spine, drop the gaze. Again, moving at your own pace here. You might notice how this side feels different than the left. You may or may not feel a stretch through that inner right thigh. Take 2 more rounds wherever you are. And then on your next inhale, let's find our neutral tabletop position, taking our right toes and swinging them off the left side of our mat this time. You might stay here, or again, you might walk your right fingertips over to the left corner of your mat, finding a deeper side body stretch. We'll stay here for 3 breaths, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. Make sure you're pressing through your shoulder blades. We're not collapsing into our shoulders here. One more inhale here. And on your exhale, bring your right hand back under your right shoulder and bring the right toes off behind you. On an inhale, let's rotate our right foot so that it's parallel with the short edge of our mat. We're gonna rotate our left knee and shin so that they're also parallel with the short edge of our mat. On an inhale, we'll open our right arm up to the sky, finding our chest opener, staying here for 1 breath. Before using our right obliques on an inhale to pull ourselves up to a kneeling position. Inhale here. As you exhale, find your gate pose, bringing your right palm down to your right shin or your right thigh, left arm overhead, bicep by the ear. Again, your gaze might be straight out, or you might look up at the sky, enjoying a nice stretch through the left side body. Stay here for 2 more breaths. Last inhale here. As As you exhale, windmill the arms down, bringing our left palm down to the mat. Right arm overhead this time, right bicep by the ear, finding our side angle stretch. Again, your gaze is neutral out in front or lifted towards the sky. Wherever you are, stay here for 2 more breaths. Enjoying a nice stretch through that right side body. On your next exhale, bring those right palms back down to the earth as we come back to our tabletop position. From here, you might curl the toes under, lift the hips back, find your downward facing dog. Make sure your hands and your feet are wide here, especially as you get later in pregnancy. It can feel really nice to take downward dog with a really wide stance. Leaves enough room for baby and helps you feel balanced. You might walk your dog here, bending one knee and then the other. Make sure your gaze is neutral, straight down in front, or even towards. Make sure your gaze is neutral here, looking straight down at the mat, or you might even look between your hands if you're suffering from any kind of dizziness. Again, if you have those blocks, you might bring your hands onto the blocks here just to lift your front body a little bit higher. Can help avoid some of that blood rush to the head and some of the dizziness that can come with downward facing dog in pregnancy. If you had a little bit of a wiggly dog, take a few final stretches here before finding a breath of stillness. If you've had a bit of a wiggly dog, take a few final stretches before we find a moment of stillness. Taking a long inhale and a long exhale. Good. Let's drop back down to our tabletop position. On an inhale, we'll step the right toes up to meet the hands, finding our low lunge. If you have those blocks, you could use them to lift the ground up a little bit. Again, just making more room for baby here. Make sure that your right knee is over that right ankle. We're not collapsing through our front body here. We're going to think about lifting and lengthening the chest and the spine. As you exhale, you might sink your hips a little bit deeper, finding a nice stretch through that left hip flexor. Stay here for one more long inhale and a long exhale. On your next inhale, begin to slowly walk the hands back towards those hips. If you have blocks, you might use them here. As we come into our half split. So you want to make sure that your hips are squared. You should be pointing directly at the short edge of your mat. Your right toes are flexed, that they're pointing up at the sky. We're not trying to collapse onto our leg here. We're not trying to bring our knee towards our nose or our nose towards our knee. So we might bend a little bit at the waist as we breathe into the back of that right leg. On your next inhale, you might walk your hands back towards the front of your mat, finding your low lunge. And as you exhale, walk them back towards your hips, finding your half splits. Continue moving through these two poses at your own pace, finding a gentle flow and a gentle stretch through both sides of your hips and your hip flexors. Inhaling into your low lunge and exhaling into your half splits. Again, if you don't have blocks, you can continue to do this. Your belly might just be a little bit closer towards that thigh. You might have to take a little bit more care to make sure your belly stays on the inside of that right leg. We don't want to compress baby here. Let's take one more wherever you are. And then let's meet back in our low lunge. Inhaling here for the last time. Before exhaling back to our tabletop position. Take one round of cat and cow here just to resettle. Inhaling, dropping the belly, opening the chest, lift the gaze. Exhale, tuck the pelvis around the spine, push through those shoulder blades before we find our neutral tabletop. And with an inhale, step our left toes up to meet the hands, finding our low lunge. Again, we're going to stay here for a few breaths. Take a moment to make sure your left knee is over that left ankle. On an inhale, we think about lifting and lengthening our spine, keeping our chest open. And as we exhale, we might think about sinking a little bit deeper into our hips, finding a deeper stretch through our right hip flexors. And if you have blocks, you might use them here to just bring the ground up to you a little bit, making more space for baby. Stay here for one more breath. Inhaling here. And as we exhale, let's walk our hands back to our half splits. Again, take a moment to check. Your hips should be over your knee. Your left toes are flexed and pointed at the sky. We're not collapsing onto that left thigh. If you have blocks, you can use them to lift the ground up. Our hips are squared towards the short edge of our mat. If you don't have blocks, just make sure that your baby is to the inside of that left leg so that the baby is not being pressed between your thigh and your stomach and potentially compressed. We'll stay here for 2 more breaths before beginning our lizard, low lunge, half split flow. Inhale, let's walk into our low lunge, hands to the inside of our foot. And as we exhale, let's walk back to our half split. Continue moving at your own pace here. Just inhaling into that low lunge, right hip flexor stretch. And exhaling, walking our hands back towards our hips, finding a stretch through the back of our left glute and left hamstring. Inhaling, low lunge. Exhale, half split. Take 2 more at your own pace. On your next inhale, let's come back to the front of our mat, finding our low lunge. And exhale, tabletop. On an inhale, let's curl the toes under, lift the hips back, finding downward facing dog. Again, make sure your base of your down dog is wide, your hips, your feet are about as wide as your mat, your hands as well. Just stay here for a few breaths, noticing how the second down dog might feel a little bit different than the first. Take one more inhale here as you bend the knees and look through the hands. As you exhale, step just the right toes up between the hands. Then rotate your feet so that both feet are pointed towards the long edge of your mat. finding your wide-legged forward fold. And if you have blocks, you might use them to bring the ground up to you. You want to make sure your hands and your gaze are out in front of your toes, maybe by, somewhere between 6 and 12 inches, rather than back between your feet, just to avoid any kind of dizziness. We'll stay here for a few breaths, then you can use those blocks. If you don't have your blocks, just keep your palms flat on the ground. On your next inhale, let's find a halfway lift. Inhale, flat back position. And exhale, back into your wide-legged forward fold. From here, begin to heel-toe the feet in together until they're just a little bit wider than your hips. Until they're just a little bit wider than your hips. Then sink the hips down towards the mat, finding your yogi squat. Again, if you don't have blocks here, no worries. You can use your elbows to press your knees wide as you sink the hips down towards the ground. If you do have a block, you might put one or even two underneath you to take this as more of a restorative pose. Staying here for a few breaths. Finding whatever iteration of your squat feels good for you today. This is such a good pose to take in your third trimester, especially as labor gets closer, since it can help baby drop down into your pelvis and prepare for delivery. It's also a great pose to take in early labor, again, just to help baby drop into position. If you do take this in labor, I recommend using at least 1 or 2 blocks under you, as opposed to just dangling there. Let's stay here for one more breath. And on your next exhale, remove your blocks if you have them, as you sink your hips onto your mat and find your Sukhasana, your comfortable seat. From here, let's come into our fire log pose, or half fire log. So you're gonna bring your right foot under your left knee and your left foot on top of your right knee. Your shins should be parallel here. If your knee doesn't rest on your foot, you could use a block underneath just to make it a little bit more comfortable. From here, let's inhale the arms up overhead and exhale, bring the left hand to the left sole, the sole of the left foot. As you drop the right hand behind you, just finding a gentle twist. We never want to twist deeply during pregnancy, especially in the later trimesters. So make sure that baby is pointing in the same direction as your hips. You can keep your gaze just off to the right, maybe just over your right shoulder, or even out in front here. And inhale, come back up. Arms overhead, and exhale, right palm to right knee. Right palm to left knee. Left hand comes behind. Again, this is not a deep twist. We're concentrating the twist in our upper body only. Baby is pointing the same direction as our hips. We might be looking off to the left, or we might keep our gaze out in front. Stay here for one more inhale. As you exhale, come back to neutral. This time, inhale, both arms up overhead. And as you exhale, bring the hands out in front, bending at the waist, finding a forward fold. You want to make sure that your back is straight here. We're not collapsing or rounding our spine, making sure there's enough space for baby. If you have blocks, you can use them. Just folding forward here to try and maximize the stretch. We're getting through that left glute. Stay here for 2 more breaths. Inhaling deeply through the nose and exhaling deeply through the nose. Your next inhale, let's come out of this pose, bringing our left toes to the mat. We'll come into a regular Sukhasana for a moment. Just inhale, arms up overhead. Exhale, let's drop the right palm down to the mat, finding a side body stretch. Inhale, back to center. And exhale, drop the left palm over to the mat, right arm up overhead. And then inhale, come back to neutral. We'll take half fire log on the other side. So again, bring your right knee to rest on top of your left foot, and your right foot rests on top of your left knee. Again, you can use blocks here if you need to, if anything is not resting or feels like it's just dangling in the air. On an inhale, we'll lift the arms up overhead. As we exhale, let's bring the right palm to the sole of the right foot. As we bring the left hand behind us and look over that left shoulder. Again, we're not taking a deep twist here. Baby is still pointing in the same direction as our hips. One more inhale here. Exhale, back to neutral. Inhale, arms up overhead. Exhale, left hand comes to that right knee. Right hand comes behind. Again, finding our gentle twist. You might look over the right shoulder. You might keep your gaze out in front. Concentrating this twist in our upper back body. Stay here for one more breath. For exhaling, back to our neutral spine, coming back to our Sukhasana, coming out of fire log pose. Before we come down to our Shavasana, let's just take a few hip circles, rotating first in one direction, and then the other. Taking any final movements that feel good for you. Come back to a neutral spine. Take one final inhale, arms up overhead. Bring the gaze to the sky. For exhaling, hands to heart. From here, we'll come to rest on our left side, finding our Shavasana. If you have those blocks, you might bring one between the knees, just for a little bit of extra comfort. You might bring one out in front, rest your forearm on it. As you find your resting pose, continue to breathe in and out through your nose. Notice how your body feels. Did you release any tension? Do you feel a little bit looser, maybe a little bit warmer than you did at the start of class? You might notice how baby feels. Have your gentle movements lulled them to sleep? Or are they kicking like my little person right now? You might bring a hand to rest on your belly. I'll leave you here. Stay in your Shavasana for as long as time allows. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more prenatal content. Thank you for practicing with me today. I hope to see you on the mat again. Namaste.